Ed Edwards may be the most heinous Zodiac mass murderer that you've never heard of. In October 1972, 3 men claiming to be Ed Edwards appeared on the game show to tell the truth. You'd be forgiven for thinking all 3 were liars based on that alone, but one had changed his name to Edward Edwards and claimed to be a reformed criminal. He had been a bold robber and an arsonist who never disguised himself and claimed that he wanted to be famous. He was placed on the FBI's most wanted list and was later apprehended and convicted. When he was released from prison in 1967, he claimed to be a changed man. But was he truly a new man? What were the details of his lifelong crimes? And how was he finally apprehended after so many years? All of this will be clearly explained in this video right now. Hello, and welcome to another video. We would appreciate it if you would give this video a like, subscribe, and ensure that the notification bell is turned on for more in-depth real crime sagas like this. Now let's jump right in. April Belasco, Ed's daughter, kept repeating the name of a town she'd lived in as a child. She was 40 years old and a mother of 3 when she crept out of bed to retrieve her laptop. Watertown, Wisconsin cold case, she typed into Google. April was obsessed with the month May 2009, with the belief that something had happened in the small town where she had spent a few months when she was only 11 years old in 1980. The first result of the search that April made on her laptop was a link to a police appeal for information about the unsolved murder of 2 teenagers a few months before April's family left. Tim Hack and Kelly Drew, both 19, went missing from a wedding reception in Watertown on August 10, 1980. The couple's remains were discovered 2 months later in a nearby forest. Kelly had been raped and strangled, while Tim had been stabbed. April was certain that she knew who the murderer was: Ed Edwards, her father. Edwards was born in 1933 in Akron, Ohio. He wrote in his autobiography that he grew up in an orphanage and was abused both physically and emotionally by the nuns there. He was released from juvenile detention to join the U.S. Marine Corps, but went AWOL and was dishonorably discharged. During his 20s and 30s, he traveled extensively, working as a ship docker, vacuum cleaner retailer, and handyman. April called the detective in charge of the case, Chad Garcia, the morning after her Google search. Garcia had discovered that Edwards had been questioned about the double murder in 1980, but no further inquiries had been made. He also discovered that the landlord of the house the family was renting at the time had told the cops in 1988 that he suspected Edwards was involved. Due to a lack of communication between the 2 police forces investigating, this lead was never pursued. Edwards was apprehended shortly after April's tip-off in July 2009. At this point in time, he was 76 years old and lived in a mobile home with April's mother, Kay, in Louisville, Kentucky. Edwards was grossly overweight, had breathing problems, and was wheelchair-bound. A DNA sample was taken and compared to DNA from the scene of the double murder. After being charged, Edwards was returned to Wisconsin and placed on remand, where he began plotting. He realized that the gig was up and eventually confessed. However, when he was faced with the possibility of spending the rest of his days in prison, Edwards decided he'd rather be executed. However, Wisconsin did not have capital punishment. As a result, he used other people's deaths as sick leverage in negotiations. Firstly, he admitted to killing Billy Lavaco, 21, as well as his girlfriend, Judy Straub, 18, on August 6, 1977, in Akron, Ohio. They were ambushed after parking in a lover's lane. The following day, their bodies were discovered in the long grass. They had both been shot. The case remained unsolved for 33 years until Edwards confessed to detectives that he was their murderer. On May 3, 2010, A few weeks after his second confession, Edwards was visited by Brian Johnson, a former cop who knew him from his time as a detective with the Geauga County Sheriff's Department in Ohio. Edwards admitted to killing his foster son, 25-year-old Dannie Boy Edwards, in Burton, Ohio in 1996. For several years, the victim had lived with Edwards and his family. Dannie's given name was originally Dannie Law Gloeckner. Edwards murdered Gloeckner in order to obtain $250,000 in insurance money. Dannie Boy, a soldier in the U.S. Army, was persuaded by Edwards to go AWOL and was taken to the woods near his home in Burton, Ohio. Edwards shot him twice in the face, killing him and dumped his body in a shallow grave, which a hunter would later discover. Edwards had familiarized himself with local law enforcement officers as a low-level informant, feeding them details about petty criminals in the town until he vanished in 1996. During the 2 years between his arrest and death, Edwards spoke to a number of journalists and cold case enthusiasts, implying that he was responsible for many more killings. In March 2011, Edwards was sentenced to death for this crime. However, he would end up dying of natural causes less than a month after his trial, on April 7, 2011, at the Corrections Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio. He avoided the lethal injection execution scheduled for August 31st. Because no one claimed his body, the state cremated him. Former Colorado detective John A. Cameron was one of Edwards' journalist contacts. Cameron specialized in cold cases and was convinced that Edwards was responsible for the deaths of Patricia Kalitsky, 16, and Lloyd Bogle, 18, on January 2, 1956, in Great Falls, Montana. Both were adolescent boys who had been shot in the head. In the hopes of obtaining more information, John wrote to Edwards and sent him money as a goodwill gesture. Following Edwards' death, John became obsessed. He was convinced that Edwards' book was a puzzle containing clues to all his other murders. Cameron spent 3 years developing a master theory that the murderer had killed hundreds of people and then framed others. He believed that Edwards was responsible for some of the most notorious murders of the last 70 years, including the infamous 1947 Black Dahlia murder in Los Angeles and the 1996 murder of the child beauty queen JonBenet Ramsey. He also believed that Edwards murdered Teresa Halbach, the subject of the hit Netflix series Making a Murderer, and he also thought that Edwards was the Zodiac killer. April revealed in a podcast that her father, Edward Edwards, was obsessed with the case and would gather the family around to watch news coverage of the infamous crimes. He'd say, "That's not right, that's not how it happened, that's not accurate." And then he'd just want to talk about the different scenarios of who the Zodiac was, April recalled. Detective Cameron is not alone in believing Edwards murdered many more people. Detective Chad Garcia, who oversaw the Hack Drew cold case, told the Daily Jefferson County Union that he believes Edwards murdered 5 to 7 more people. Garcia drew on several sources, including Edwards' autobiography, to create a timeline of other unsolved murders he may have committed. The final episode of It Was Him features the 1960 stabbing deaths of Larry Payton and Beverly Allen in Portland, Oregon. This case, unlike many others, has actual hard evidence. Edwards was seen hanging around the crime scene with a bullet wound in his arm, which police suspected was related to the couple's windshield bullet hole. Police arrested him, but he escaped before being questioned, and for some reason, they did not pursue him. Meanwhile, 2 other men were convicted of the murders and sentenced to life in prison. However, they were both released without explanation after only a few years. Both had long maintained their innocence. Cameron hopes to clear them officially. Cameron may be correct about one theory, and he makes a compelling case for why the Payton-Allen case should be revisited. Unfortunately, the rest of Cameron's theories were dismissed due to his factual inaccuracies, bias-confirming investigative methods, cherry-picked evidence, and dangerously dubious logic that may have destroyed Cameron's best, and possibly last, chance at being taken seriously. With these numerous unsolved murders associated with Ed Edwards, do you think he was the Zodiac serial killer? What are your thoughts on a daughter proving her father guilty? And do you believe the former homicide detective John Cameron's theories? We would love to know. Share your thoughts and answers in the comments section below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.